Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Decades with Joe E. Kramer.
It's 9 o'clock.
Hey, everybody, this is Ivan from Men Without Hats. Hi, everyone, this is Russell Hitchcock of Air Supply.
I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. I know you were right, believing for so long.
Hey everybody, it's Robert Mason from War.
Heaven isn't too far away. Love until it ever begins.
And you're listening to Decades.
You're listening to Decades. Let's all hang out with Joey Kramer on Decades.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are in a Decades Artist Spotlight, and tonight we got to welcome back to the show. He's been on with a couple times. He's the maker of the Pac-Man, not the video game, but the song, of course. The one, the only, Jerry Buckner. Buckner and Garcia. So we're going to, of course, play the music and talk to the man behind the song that everybody knows from about 1981. Do you believe it's been 37 years since that song has come out? It's incredible. So let's get it started. Jerry Buckner in the Decades Artist Spotlight from Buckner and Garcia, and this is their big one, Pac-Man Fever on the Decades Artist Spotlight.
I got a pocket full of quarters and I'm headed to the arcade. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm bringing everything I made. I got a callus on my finger and my shoulder's hurting too. I'm gonna eat them all up just as soon as they turn blue. 'Cause I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. It's driving me crazy. Driving me crazy. I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind. Going out of my mind. I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind. Going out of my mind. I got all the patterns down up until the ninth key. I got Speedy on my tail and I know it's either him or me. So I'm heading out the back door and in the other side. Gonna eat the cherries up and take them all for a ride. I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. It's driving me crazy. It's driving me crazy. I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind. Going out of my mind. I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind. Going out of my mind. I'm gonna blink to the left and move to the right. Punky's too slow and Blinky's out of sight. Now I've got 'em on the run and I'm looking for the high score. So it's once around the block and I slide back out the side door. I'm really cooking now, eating everything inside. All my money's gone, so I'll be back tomorrow night. 'Cause I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. It's driving me crazy. Driving me crazy. I got Pac-Man fever. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind. Going out of my mind.
is the Decades Artist Spotlight with Joe E. Kramer. This week's artist.
It's another Decades Artist Spotlight, and tonight I welcome back to the show songwriter, producer, keyboardist, and creator of the Pac-Man Fever, Mr. Jerry Buckner. How you doing, Jerry?
I'm doing great. I need to record that intro and use it everywhere. That was great.
You are the man of the Pac-Man Fever. I want to talk about that, in a little, because I know you get asked the same questions all the time. I've had you on the show before, but for the millionth time, give us a little background of how you got started, before the whole Pac-Man Fever thing hit.
Well, my partner and best friend, Gary Garcia, and I grew up together in Akron, Ohio. We had separate bands and then ended up working together. We played in high school bands, and then we ended up after that going together and working in bands. I ended up in Atlanta, and Gary soon followed after. And we started doing jingles and commercials to make a living in addition to playing, in clubs. And eventually we hooked up with the BGO group that had the Atlanta Rhythm section and Alicia Bridges and other groups over there.
Right.
And we were doing some work with them. Well, we went to this restaurant one night to eat. This was summer of '81, and we see this game, Pac-Man Fever, or Pac-Man game. And we start playing like everybody else.
Everybody calls it Pac-Man Fever now.
Yeah. We start playing, and
right.
We got hooked, and we were supposed to be at the studio working, and we were spending most of our time down there playing the game.
Right.
So we thought, hey, you know what? Maybe if we do a song about this, we can get some local play, and it might help our jingle business. So that was the original idea and concept behind it, and we did. Of course, it went a lot further than just Atlanta.
And so they say the rest is history.
The rest is, world history.
And, you had a career before Pac-Man Fever started, and I was interested in doing, some of my research beforehand, because I've had you on a few times. I wanted to talk a little bit, give a little bit of new things in here. And I never realized two things that you could connect to Buckner and Garcia. One, you played at a place called The Castle. Is that correct, in Akron?
Yes, it was a teen club.
Right, a teen dance club. And you actually had interaction there with Chrissy Hind, who is with the Pretenders.
Yeah, Chrissy lived close by in a place called Fairlawn, Ohio. And the Castle was the spot to go when we were in high school, which would have been about 65, 66 in that era. And everybody went out there. The place would be packed. They were open three nights a week.
Right.
Anyway, Chrissy came out there, and like everybody else, hanging around. And she told us that she was going to be a rock and roll star one day. That was her thing. And we said, yeah, okay, cool. And of course, she went and did it.
Lo and behold, and you were in a band. You two weren't in a band together yet, but you were in a band called the Pogues. And I found something interesting that you almost had Joe Walsh, as a guitarist in a band.
Yes. Now, what did you said the Rogues, right?
The Rogues, right?
Yeah. Okay. I thought you said the Pogues.
No, the Pogues. The Pogues were a huge band. No offense.
I had a band called the Rogues.
Right, the
and
Rogues.
It was a pretty horrible band, to be honest with you. It was one of my first efforts in high school, and it was mostly friends wanted to be in the band, and they didn't all play. One of my friends wanted to be in, and we gave him a bass guitar to kind of hold, and I played. I was the only one that really. Lance Scarpetti played in the group. He was a drummer. And we had a guitar player, and we had a whole band and everything, but it was not a very good band. Anyway, at some point the guitar player left, and so I'm looking for a guitar player, and there was a group called the Measles that Joe's was in up in Kent, Ohio, where everything was going on. And I had, we'd cross paths or whatever some, and so I knew he'd play guitar. I mean, you got to remember, this is before he became the big, the guitars and everything. I mean, he was just another local guy around there playing. So I called him up and said, listen, we need a guitar player in our band. And Joe said, he said, why don't you come up here, we'll talk about it. And he was going to Kent State. He was living in a barn or something with a bunch of guys. So I drove up there. It was wintertime, freezing cold, snow up to your butt, and got lost, couldn't find the place. And, of course, there was no such thing as cell phones. And I just got tired of it and just drove back home. And when I got back home the next day, some other guitar player called and wanted to play. So that's what happened. So Joe came that close to playing in the Rogues, and I'm sure he's glad that never happened. It wouldn't have lasted long because we weren't out of the caliber that he was at that time.
It could have altered history, though, if he would have been part of the Rogues instead of where he went.
yeah, you might have jumped off a bridge or something. It could have been bad, you know.
Now, all kidding aside, you were, I mean, Pac-Man fever and the whole Pac-Man craze wasn't your first thing into the record business. And we'll talk a little bit about WKRP coming up. But you were also in a band called Wild Butter, which
Wild Butter. Now that was a different situation. We were good, very good singers
right.
and good musicians. And a friend of mine was in a band called The Collection. You know, those kind of
right.
names back then.
Always psychedelic.
They recorded a song called Little Man, and it was cool. Even today, I listen to it and go, it's a pretty cool song. And but nothing became of it. So I took it to a guy in Cleveland that was connected to, in the business and everything. And he went to New York and made an album deal based on that song. Well, there was no band. I mean, it was just, I just took a shot, So Rick Guerin, who sang lead on, Rick played drums. So we said, we got to put a band together. We ought to do an album. So we got a guy named John Sinet who played great guitar. In fact, speaking of Joe Walsh, Joe said that John Sinet was the best 12-string guitar player he ever heard. He was really good at 12-string, just the finger picking
right.
and stuff back in the electric folk stuff and all that, the Byrds and all that kind of thing. And we got him, and then we got a bass player that was really good from another band. So we had a pretty good band, and we had great vocals, really, really good vocals. But we had a very short time to put an album together, and we did, and it was kind of a potpourri of this guy's song and that guy's song, and put together. And then we did some remakes of New York Mining Disaster, and I've Been Waiting for You, a couple, maybe one other one. And but it wasn't a bad album. In fact, people, it's pretty well received online. I mean, people seem to like it, and and of course a lot of times they discovered that I was playing in it. And Gary entered the band towards the end. He didn't play originally, but then Steve quit, and Gary came in and took over at bass. So we had an album, had a single. The single was, there really wasn't anything on the album original that I think you would consider to be a hit.
Well, I saw
then.
The song "Terribly Blind" seems to be getting the most hits when you look it up, like on YouTube online. That song seems to be the one that gets the most hits out of any of the other songs.
Yeah, it does, and people, I guess, because it was kind of a Jefferson Airplane kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's why I say that the album, each song is kind of got a different sort of a style to it. But yeah, people seem to like Terribly Blind. Probably would have been a lot better off to put that one out especially at that time because of the guitars and everything. But I always liked. Another song in there that I liked that they never put out, but Roxanne is the one they put out, and it was a regional thing, but nothing national.
And what came first to it in the timeline? I want to talk about the big hit WKRP in Cincinnati, but you were also with Gary, and now there wasn't really a title to the band other than Animal Jack and a song called "Gotta Hear the Beat."
Animal Jack was a song that came out of frustration for us. We teamed up with a guy that had some recording equipment, some 4-track professional equipment,
right?
And teamed up with his name was John Mondel. John ended up recording most of the bands in Akron down the road. The Devo and all those bands came through his little studio. That's kind of where that whole Akron sound, and it came through John's studio. But at that time, we had helped him, and we all put a little studio together. And we were doing stuff and sending songs, going to New York, and we couldn't get anywhere. It was very frustrating. And so I got it in my head one night. I thought, why don't we just do some song with just a beat to it? Nothing but a beat, just a driving beat and just stupid lyrics, and see if somebody likes that. So I dreamed up this "Gotta Hear the Beat" thing, and it was a novelty kind of thing. Well, not kind of thing. It was. I mean, it was crazy. It was like the concept was the guy is singing "I Gotta Hear the Beat" over and over because he's crazy. He's lost his mind. And then at the end, they come and take him away. I guess a little bit of touch of the coming to take me away thing. But at the end, they come and take Animal Jack away, and you hear him screaming and everything. So we did it. Well, every time we would play that for anybody in the business, they would, 3 different labels bought that and put it out. And because everybody would hear, one guy at a record company said, listened to it. He said, "That's one of the worst records I ever heard in my life." He said, "But I thought that same thing of Surfin' Bird, which sold a couple of million copies." He said, "We might put it out." So the last label was Laurie Records, and Laurie was actually a major label. They had Jerry and the Pacemakers and Dion and a bunch of acts, and but it just it didn't. We'd get a little bit of play, but it never happened. But that was the idea behind that. The funny thing is the little studio we had, and it was behind or next to a little barber shop at Akron, a little small little place. Eventually, a record store took over where the studio had been, and actually had our record in there, selling our record, and it was in the place where it had been they didn't know that. It had been recorded in that store. I thought that was pretty cool.
Now then, of course, you hit it. Now, I guess this was afterwards. Then you wrote for Steve Carlisle and a big hit, WKRP in Cincinnati, which, of course, everybody knows the TV show. The song was a huge success. And you, of course, I don't think everybody knows that you were behind that song.
Yeah, that actually happened right around the Pac-Man fever time. Right. And there was a guy named Steve Carlisle. The song, the whole concept for the show came out of Atlanta. There was a guy here with an advertising company, and he ended up out in California at Mary Tyler Moore Productions, and he based that show on a radio station here in Atlanta, that Wixie Radio, and a couple of the characters were actually kind of like characters at the station. Not all of them, but a couple of them. So Steve Carlisle was a singer, a jingle singer here, and so they got him to sing the theme song because he'd worked with them and all that, and so they had him do the theme. But the theme back then, those songs weren't very long, maybe 30 seconds, 60 seconds. They didn't, they were just theme songs for the beginning of the shows. Well, we made a deal with our songs with MCA Records for Steve Carlisle, just on songs that we wrote. Well, then when they found out that he had done the KRP song, they said, well, we need to put that out. So we had to write new lyrics, extend it, and go in and re-record it and try to record it as close as we could to the original. But we put in, there's a break. I'm playing piano on the break and guitar, so it was an extended version with new lyrics and everything. So we went in and did that and released it. It did real well. The funny thing is, after it was out for a while, the record company comes to us and they say, "Look, some of the stations they want at the end, instead of saying WKRP Cincinnati, they'd like you to put their call letters in." We said, "Yeah, we'll do that." Well, we didn't realize it was like 100 stations.
Right.
I mean, we stood in the studio for 2 days. Gary having to sing that or Steve having to sing it over and over.
And that happened with a lot of songs through the years, that there'd be different versions for every radio station.
Yeah, there was a song way back in the, it might have been 50s or early 60s. I think it was High School USA or something.
USA, yeah.
If you remember that. And yeah, they had to go in and redo, I mean, can you imagine all the different cities and high schools? Good luck, but that happened.
And okay, we're approaching Pac-Man Fever here. Before Pac-Man Fever, and this is something you guys did a lot. You did a lot of names under different monikers, and if I could remember the name, I have the name of the song written down, obviously, because I play it, especially at Christmas time. I think you know where I'm going with this. Merry Christmas in the NFL. And that was Guard and Vorgish, was that it?
Vigorish is a term, a gambling term, and that wasn't our idea. It was the management company.
Right.
Some of the guys there, they did football. It was in the fall when it came out, and Vigorish is some sort of term to do with betting on football games or something. So when Bob Carr was a local morning show personality, character personality, and we thought he'd be good for this song. It was just an idea to come up with, and we wrote it. And so we took Bob in because he was just kind of a southern character on the radio, and we thought it'd be funny. So we put him on there, and sure enough, a major company in New York, they liked it and put it out. It got play. It charted, in Billboard, not up high or anything. But it did get play, and for a long time it got played. The problem with it now is the teams are so, some of the names are so different, and of course Howard Cosell is long gone, but I get it. We still get a little play on it every Christmas.
I play it every Christmas. I always play that song.
Great, thank you.
Or something. I think the name of the band was Player One. They did a song called Space Invaders. Kid Stuff Incorporated did some song about Donkey Kong, ironically, but here you guys are, and you record this song. Now, first of all, were you Pac-Man players?
Well, yeah.
And were you good at it?
Yeah. So-so, Gary was probably a little better. We had a close friend who was really good at it, In fact, he's the one that did the liners in the album version. You know, in the album notes, there's cheat sheets.
All the cheat sheets. Yep, still have
yeah,
those.
and a funny story about that is I met about 5 years ago. I finally met the guy who had Billy Mitchell, who broke the record on Pac-Man, and got to know him. Great guy. And I showed him. We talked about that, about the patterns, and he says, you know, those aren't right. They don't work right. So I made him sign one because we have them now that we just give. You know, we sign them if I'm appearing somewhere. You know, somebody wants one, we'll sign them. And I had him sign. You know, Billy Mitchell sign it, and I forget what he put on there. Something funny about the patterns, but if I ever find them, I'm going to put some of them up online.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are on a Decades Artist Spotlight. Jerry Buckner. Buckner and Garcia. Gary Garcia passed away back in 2011. Jerry is still making music. We'll be talking a little bit more about that coming up. Of course, the song you just heard, Do the Donkey Kong, which they did perform on Bandstand. They did Pac-Man Fever, and they did Do the Donkey Kong with cool graphics. We got more music from Buckner and Garcia and the second half of my interview with Jerry Buckner. So hang on. This is Decades on the River, 105 and 103.5 around the world, theriverindpa.com, Decades with joeekramer.com, and of course the Radioable app for your iPhone or Android device, also Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Yes. More of the Decades Artist Spotlight coming up.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight.
Northeast PA's The River.
The centipede multiplies and divides and comes after you from every side. Faster and faster, row by row, he slides through the rocks to get you from below. Oh, centipede, you can't run away. You can't run away. You can't run. You can't hide. I'm coming to get you. Here I come. The centipede twists and bends. The spiders are his only friends. If you can get them before they get you, they go back to the top and you start on rack 2. Oh, centipede, you can't run away. You can't run away. You can't get away, little centipede. I'm right behind you. Don't try hiding behind the mushrooms. I see you. The centipede multiplies and divides and comes after you from every side. Faster and faster, row by row, he slides through the rocks to get you from below. Oh, centipede, you can't run away. You can't run away. The spiders can't help you now. I'm gonna get you. Go ahead, run your little legs off. Do you have Nikes for all of them? Oh, understand now. You want to play hide and seek, don't you? I'll play with you. Come out wherever you are. Come here, little centipede. I'm gonna chase you down now. You can't fool me by changing colors. Here I come.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are in a Decades Artist Spotlight. Jerry Buckner, you just heard Ode to Centipede. See all the video. If you never heard this album, you can get Pac-Man Fever, BucknerGarcia.com. You can order a copy of the CD. I believe it's even available on vinyl. So check it out. Now back to more of our interview with Mr. Jerry Buckner. You go from the, being in Atlanta and in this, you did record part of Pac-Man Fever in an apartment. Is that correct?
No.
Or wrote it in Europe or whatever. I heard
We wrote it. We wrote
okay.
it in my apartment. Yeah, we wrote it over in my apartment. And actually, we wrote some lyrics. We wrote the chorus and lyrics, and we took it over to BGO Music, which was Buddy Bowie and Arnie Geller. That's a BGO.
Right.
Took it over there and played it for them, and they liked it. And they said, let's record that, because they had a big studio at the time over there. So we said, okay. Well, when we got back, before we went in the studio, a week later or whenever we went, we decided we didn't like the lyrics. So Gary changed the lyrics, and we pretty much kept the chorus, but the lyrics. And I wish I had saved those original lyrics. That would be so cool, but I didn't do it, and so we'll never know. But that out there somewhere, torn up in a
landfill somewhere. The
landfill somewhere,
original
little
lyrics.
piece of paper of that. But yeah, we wrote it in my apartment and wrote it, fairly quick.
It's amazing because you go through all this, and before you know it, there you are, these two guys who look like working class guys on American Bandstand with Dick Clark standing next to you, and they put a lot of work into your most of the performances on American Bandstand, standard performances, but yours, they produced it. I mean, I remember it was like they did little kind of effects when you were performing the song. It was actually quite advanced for the time.
Yeah, it really was. For that time, what they come up with, of course that was ABC Network, but what they come up with, and you're right, most times the bands would sing and that would be the end of it. But they did, and it was exciting. It was terrifying, absolutely terrifying for us, because you're right. We're here we are, a couple of guys in Atlanta, and we climb on board an airplane and fly out to California, and suddenly we're doing all these TV shows, and it was just surreal. And I remember when we were in our dressing room at ABC waiting to do the Dick Clark show, and he comes into the room to say hello to us, and he walks in, he's wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, which that in itself was just bizarre to see,
because you never saw him without a tie on ever.
No, all your life you've watched this guy on TV. He's a legend, absolute legend, and he always had a suit on, and that famous voice that you heard over the TV. Now you're hearing it in a room. And we're sitting there, and then he starts talking, and he sits down on the couch and sticks his feet up on a footstool thing, and we're talking. He's talking about how he said we do 6 of these shows in a weekend. He said it's killing me to do all these shows and do the other show he was doing on TV, and actually used a couple of words that you wouldn't use on TV. And we're sitting there. I mean, I'm sitting there looking. I can't believe that I'm doing it. I can't believe all this, And our manager knew him, had worked with him with some other groups, so they were talking back and forth. But he just said, well, guys, you'll do your song, we'll do a little interview, and then do another song. He said, in the interview, I'll probably ask you stuff like, and he just threw out a question, and we just looked at him. We just sat there looking at him, and he says, guys, it's TV,
You got to answer.
you got to answer. You can't just stand there. So, but I think Dick Clark. Oh, I don't think I know from all the years of. There's a lot of guys like us. Most of them coming in there under the same conditions.
Everybody
and
says
they had
the same
that
thing.
show set up to where you couldn't screw up.
Right.
And
there were other bands there with you that day. Do you remember who else was with you that day performing?
yeah, Huey Lewis and the News was in the next room. Who's the English female singer? I can't think of her name. She sang so many hits. Little cute little girl. What's her name?
Do you know the song?
My baby takes the
Sheena
morning
Easton.
train.
Sheena Easton.
Sheena Easton.
Yeah.
And in fact, we stayed at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and she was in a room like a couple down from me. And one day she had the door kind of cracked open, and she was in there singing, warming up or whatever. And it was kind of neat to hear her, Sheena Easton in there singing, in her room, But yeah, they were there, and Bertie was there. Bertie Higgins, of course. Bertie, we knew Bertie because he was from Atlanta.
Right.
In fact, at one time in the Billboard Top 10, 3 of the songs were Atlanta artists: Paul Davis, us, and Bertie. So it's pretty cool. It was kind of an Atlanta time,
It's incredible. It's like, how did I get here? Sitting there on
Yeah,
American
I mean,
Bandstand.
it's just nuts. I remember Gary and I driving around Beverly Hills, just, driving around. They had a car for us, a Lincoln, drive around. And we're driving around, and on the radio, on KISS, I think it was KISS at the time, here comes our song. And we're in Beverly Hills. And, we look at each other, and it was like... Gary said, not bad for a couple of, bozos from Akron,
It's funny, and, it's always funny on American Bandstand is watching, obviously it was lip sync back then, but the two of you're going at it on that keyboard like crazy, and Gary, he didn't even play the solo and everything on that song.
No.
And he
didn't play the solo. A guy named Rick Hinkle played the solo.
He was going at that guitar. He did that solo, but the two of you going at those. I'm looking at what kind of keyboard you had there, but you were going at both of them.
Oh, yeah. We were, it was just so weird. We walked in by the top 10 board and all that stuff and rate a record. It was just craziness, and but they knew that. That's why they had the show set up the way that they did, and it was just, it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But at the time, we were just absolutely terrified, to go out there, because that was the first show we did out there. Had we, after we started doing a few of those shows, it wasn't so bad, but when we were in New York, they wanted us to do Live at 5, which was a local show, but there was millions of people that watched it because it was New York. Well, we slipped away. They put us in this room and all these press people in there, and we slipped out of there and went down and found the bar in the building, and we're down there having a few beers. And they always assigned you somebody. The label would have somebody like a babysitter with you to make sure you don't get in trouble and get to all your appearances. And we ditched everybody. We're down there and having a few. Well, she finally finds us in there, and she says, "We have to go. You have to go do this interview." Well, we were feeling pretty good, man. And I remember walking. It was cold, wintertime. We were walking over I guess it was NBC, and we went in there. And Gary, we got ready to go in the studio, and I said, each of us said, "Hope she talks to you first," And it was actually Connie. What was her last name? Connie Chung.
Oh, yeah.
Before she was big national,
right.
She was doing that. And she told us at the end of the interview, we did pretty good, but she said, after the interview, she says, "Let me tip you guys. Don't let you let me control the interview." She said, "You don't want to do that. Don't let the guy host do that. You need to jump in there and like a politician and make it go the way you want." So we said, "Thanks for that. We appreciate the advice."
That whole talking a little bit more. I know I don't want to hold you here too long, but Pac-Man Fever, the album. I'm probably one of the few people you could hear more songs from that album on my show than anywhere else. Between Pac-Man Fever, which probably is the least played. I played Do the Donkey Kong more than I think anybody has ever played it. That's my favorite song on that album. Ode to Centipede, Froggy's Lament, and Going Berserk. They're the songs that you could hear one of those songs every week probably on my show. And I think my favorite is Going Berserk. That song, it's funny, but it's actually a good song. And that was the thing about the songs in those albums. They were about video games, but they were actual songs. You know what I mean? It wasn't just a parody or like a Weird Al type song. They actually were good songs.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and that's what we try to do. We decided early on, including with Pac-Man, because we were pop songwriters. We were, writing pop songs, trying to do, promote our songs and stuff. I mean, I've got tons of songs we recorded prior to Pac-Man, and regular songs and all. But we decided that we wanted to write songs that would be good pop songs on their own.
Right.
We realized what we were doing. We realized that the song was about Pac-Man and would need sound effects, but there was a lot of Pac-Man songs out, as you were mentioning earlier, game songs. But there were several Pac-Man songs, including Weird Al. In fact, Weird Al told a mutual friend of ours. He said that it was kind of a smart aleck remark about if mine had been out first or whatever. Well, I don't think so, Al.
He's the one that did the thing for Taxman.
Yeah, he was a parody guy.
He
didn't do original stuff. I could do parody stuff all day long. You give me any song, and I can write parody. I did it when I was in radio for a while. We did parodies. Not hard to do, but coming up with an original song is tough to do. But we wanted to try to make the songs able to stand on their own, at least arrangement-wise and hook-wise and all that. And I appreciate a lot of people notice that. I've had younger guys who have become producers have contacted me over the years saying that they learned a lot from our album, believe it or not, off the music. We use top musicians here in Atlanta, some of the best people. And so I think the songs, like you say, they come out pretty good. Donkey Kong was the second release, and it charted, but it was hard to follow Pac-Man, with anything.
Yeah, after a song like that, it's kind of hard. The funny thing is I tell people, if you listen closely to Pac-Man, you hear that hidden message about somebody ordering a sandwich at the deli.
Yeah, there you go. If you got a real
careful.
quiet room and a real quiet record player. But for the second release, there was a kind of a issue over which song. We wanted them to put out Frogger, but the company wanted to put out Donkey Kong. And so we went back and forth, and of course, the record company won out because they're the record company.
Yeah,
tell
record
CBS
company,
what
so.
to do. And I understood. We understood why they wanted to do it. But a lot of people, even to this day, say, boy, if you had, if you could have done Frogger, and because there was parts of it that I really liked. But my favorite song in there is, I would say, Centipede.
Yeah, Centipede, Going Berserk. I played them all the time.
Now, Going Berserk, you probably know this story. Going Berserk, and what's the other song? You would think I would know all this stuff, but there's two songs on there that were originally regular songs. We started cutting the album after Pac-Man. We started cutting the album. We cut two songs, regular songs. Well, the vice president came down to check on everything, and he said, no, we want all game songs.
All video game songs.
And I understand that too, and we understood that too
Right.
then, but we were thinking, we wanted to continue on and do some of our regular songs. So we had put a lot of time and money into the first two, so we had to go back in and redo them and make game songs out of them. But I've got the original songs, and I put them up on our site, the Pac-Man Vault. And it's interesting to hear them because it's the same music. Everything's the same but the lyrics.
And, by the way, your site, BucknerGarcia.com. Obviously, you've done a lot since then. As we slowly wrap things up here, Wreck-It Ralph a couple years ago, and the original one was out. You ended up cutting the song out, which was supposed to be in the beginning. And I remember you telling me last time that because it was so late that you wrote that song, it ended up being in the end credits instead of the beginning credits.
Yeah. What happened is, and we learned a little bit about the movie business
Right.
too. Pretty tough business. We got the call from California, Tom McDougall. He's the music guy there at Disney, and they called and said, "Look, we have this song," and they were going to have one of the guys in the movie, but he couldn't do it. And then Tom said, I thought, wait a minute, if we can get those guys, it would really help the movie. So, unfortunately, Gary had just passed away a few months before, and I told Tom, I said, well, we would love to do it, but I said, Gary's, he said, well, can you get someone else to sing it? I said, well, yeah, but, I don't know, if it's going to, anyway, work out. Well,
Right.
we did it, and it did work out. Danny Jones sang it. Danny was a drummer and close friend of ours in the band, and he did, I think, an outstanding job. And they put it. Disney loved it and put it out, and we were hoping it would be in number 2, but it's not going to be in there. So.
And you did a couple things today, because Old School Games, this is all on your website. By the way, Old School Games, Pac-Man Fever, Eat 'em Up, which has 8 million views on YouTube. So you're keeping busy without a doubt.
Yeah. In fact, the Old School Games, we're gonna put out a different version of that, a completely remixed, different version. Not happy with that version, so we're gonna do one that's gonna be really sounding a lot different, and we're working on that now. But what happened on Old School Games, and you try to do things that make sense to you,
Right.
And we thought, because the song, I mean, as you know, Pac-Man Fever has been featured recently on
The
several
Goldberg,
TV
a
shows.
bunch of shows.
Goldberg's, Family Guy.
Right.
I can't think of all the other ones, but in Tonight Show, they played it on there a couple of times. So we thought, well, maybe it's time to, in addition to the remake of Pac-Man Fever, Eat 'em Up, maybe we could do a new song, because we get that all the time. Hey, you guys going to do any new stuff? So we thought, well, let's do something that would fit the times, and we thought Old School Games, because of everything, and it's really heating up and
Right.
getting a lot bigger now. But instead of doing it in the style of Buckner Garcia, we thought, well, maybe we should do it more in a contemporary thing. So we tried to do something more of like a contemporary kind of a song. And I think we did okay with it, but it doesn't fit us. It doesn't fit who we are. And so we're going to redo it and put it out. It's going to sound more like something we would have done back then. I think that would make more sense.
We are on Decades Artist Spotlight. Joining me tonight, Jerry Buckner, of course. Buckner and Garcia, nobody will ever, 100 years from now, everybody will remember Pac-Man Fever, without a doubt. And I thank you so much for once again joining us on the show. We're going to do this again. We're not going to wait 5 years again to do this again. I do appreciate you being on the show.
I thank you for having me. Always a good time. Always enjoy it. And thank you for playing all our songs. Hi, this is Jerry Buckner of Buckner and Garcia, and you're listening to Decades with Joey Kramer.
One step at a time. The way that he moves has no reason to rhyme. He hops and jumps, dodges and ducks, cars and buses, vans and trucks. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping till you get to the top. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping, you can never stop. Go, Froggy, go. Hiya, kids. Froggy takes one step at a time. The way that he moves has no reason to rhyme. There's snakes and insects, otters and things. At times I wish Froggy had wings. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping till you get to the top. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping, you can never stop. Go, Froggy, go. Froggy takes one step at a time. The way that he moves has no reason to rhyme. The diving turtles have fooled him again. I guess for old Froggy it's sink or swim. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping till you get to the top. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping, you can never stop. Go, Froggy, go. Ribbit. Froggy takes one step at a time. The way that he moves has no reason to rhyme. He rides on the logs all the way to the top and into his cage with one final hop. Go, Froggy, go. You gotta keep on hopping till you get to
right here on Decades.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
Decades Artist Spotlight happening right now with Jerry Buckner, Buckner and Garcia. Always a great time to have him on my show. Got to thank him. Next Decades Artist Spotlight you will hear will be coming up in a few weeks. Mark White of the band Spin Doctors gave us Two Princes and Little Miss Can't Be Wrong and Jimmy Olsen's Blues and Cleopatra's Cat, all that cool stuff. That'll be our next Decades Artist Spotlight. Listen for when I will be playing it very soon. More decades coming up, including Singing with the Sam. Hang on, it's coming up next.